And now, it's time for I Hear You, the part of our show where Jack Worthing, that's me, answers your letters and questions about our life in Wellington Wells. And today's first letter is from Charles Hawtrey of St. James Parade. Dear Uncle Jack, I always get eliminated early in Simon Says. It's so frustrating because I love Simon Says and I don't get to play very much of it before I get confused and I'm out. What can I do? Well, Charles, I'm so glad you care about Simon Says. It's one of my favourite games, as you probably know. In fact, sometimes I wish someone would come and be the announcer so I could come to Hamlin and play Simon Says. Say, what a lovely idea. Why don't you come here and I'll go there? Ah, yes, but that doesn't solve your problem, does it? How can you enjoy Simon Says better? Well, I can't promise you a way to be less confused. After all, a bit of confusion is normal when you're taking your joy, and you don't want to cut down on your joy, do you? No, of course not. Don't be ridiculous. But look, just because you're out doesn't mean you can't keep playing. Just go to the sidelines and keep playing. After all, no one's going to arrest you for continuing to wave your arms around when I say wave your arms around, eh? I mean, when I say Simon Says move your arms around, right? Good. Well, I hope that's helpful, Charles, and thank you very much for writing. Here's another letter from Mrs. Gillian Overshaw of St. Giles Crescent. Mrs. Overshaw writes, Dear Uncle Jack, I found the most peculiar thing in my garden. Perhaps you can help me identify it. It has the general shape of a garden gnome. That is, it is short and squat and has a rounded pointy top, just like a gnome's pointy hat. But it's smooth and metal, and nothing is painted on it. What is it? Should I make it into a lamp? If I get the hat off, it would make a perfect umbrella stand. I think I can get the hat off if I heat up the bottom part in the fireplace. What do you think? Oh, well, Mrs. Overshaw, I think what you might have here is an unexploded artillery shell. So, no, my dear, I would not particularly recommend heating it up in the fireplace. In fact, I would recommend not touching your garden gnome any further. Especially, do not drop it or drop anything on it. Now, if any of the heroes of the Home Army are listening to this broadcast, and I know some of you are, would you mind dropping by Mrs. Gillian Overshaw's place at 25 St. Giles Crescent and help her in disposing of this rather peculiar garden gnome? Thank you. There's a good chap. Well, this one is from Mrs. Susan Brimble of Northumberland Passage. Dear Mr. Worthing. Oh, Susan. There's no need to be so formal. You can call me Jack, or Uncle Jack. But don't call me Mr. Worthing, because that's my father. And definitely don't call me Mrs. Worthing. Anyway, dear Mr. Worthing, my husband stays a really long time in the bath. He comes home after work and immediately runs a bath. And he stays in it until it's time for dinner. Sometimes he even stays in there after I tell him it's time for dinner. Last night, I even brought him his dinner in the bath, and he left it there on the side of the sink. What's a wife to do? Well, Susan, or Sue. May I call you Sue? I'd like to think I can call you Sue. Susan, I'm not a doctor. I only play one on TV. But I do know some doctors, and I asked them about your husband. They think your husband might just need a little more joy in his life. He seems to be trying to soak it in through his skin, and, well, that takes a very long time, and it'll turn him into a prune. So please be sure that your husband pops a joy or two when he wakes up, and a joy or two before he goes to bed, and I think you'll be seeing a lot more of them in a considerably drier state. There are very few problems that joy won't make better. All right, Susie? Good. Well, I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time. Tune in again tomorrow for more cheery answers to your questions about your life in Wellington Wells. This is Jack Worthing saying cheerio, and on with your day. I'll see you soon. Well, it's getting late, isn't it? and it's time for all good citizens to be getting ready to go to bed. Would you like me to read you a bedtime story? Of course you would. Well, sit down next to the fire, if you've got one, and wrap a blanket around yourselves, and I'll tell you something that happened. Tonight's story is called The Pied Piper, and some people say it actually took place, and some people say it actually took place in our very own Hamelin. But who knows? The past is deep and dark and filled with mists and strange things that move in the night. It's best not to go into it. Strange things happen in fairy tales, but even stranger and nastier things happen in the past. Thank goodness we're not living then, and our days are bright and filled with joy. Once upon a time, there was a town called Hamelin. It wasn't the name of the town. That's just what it was called. It was a happy town, full of rich merchants and hard-working smiths and beautiful girls and jovial lads. But awful things can happen to good people. And little did the people of Hamelin know, but dark times were coming. There was a hard winter when wolves came down from the hills and attacked the sheep. And the wolves brought crows which would wait for the sight of rotting meat and then descend in swarms. And some said, though no one ever saw it, that the crows did not always wait for death. And some said it was not only wolves who were murdering animals out in the fields. The crows knew that they only said caw. But if the winter was hard, the summer was harder still. For the summer brought rats. They came onto the beaches from a ship that had sailed from France. At first there were just a few, but soon there were hundreds of rats, then thousands of them. They swarmed into the town, and they said to themselves in their rat speech, "Here is a rich town. Let us eat everything we can." So they ate the grain, they chewed their way into cupboards to eat the cheese, they even ate chickens when they could corner them. Nothing was safe. The villagers, well, they were at their wits' end. If you can kill one rat, you can set traps for 12 rats. But who can kill 1,000 rats? As long as there are 2 rats, in weeks there'll be dozens, and in weeks after that, there will be thousands again. The villagers were in despair. But one day, a tall man came to town. He was a piper. He played a pipe. So they called him the Pied Piper, for he wore a coat of many colours. He was not very good at playing the pipes, but when the villagers told him to stop playing, he told them, "Although I'm not very good at playing to entertain people, I know what to play to rats." Well, who would play music for rats, you ask? Well, the piper never explained, but he offered the town to pipe their rats away. He said, "It'll cost you a great deal of money. But I promise you, when it's all over, there will be no more rats." He even promised that if he left a single rat, they need pay him nothing. Now the villagers of Hamelin were not poor, but they liked their money. Still, they thought they would never have to pay the piper. I mean, after all, who could possibly rid the town of every last rat? So they agreed to the piper's terms. And I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time. Tune in again tomorrow evening, and I'll tell you the rest of the story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Will the town get rid of their rats? And how will they pay the piper? It's a lovely story, and I'm sure you'll enjoy how it ends. For now, this is Jack Worthing saying good night all, and see you tomorrow. And now, it's once again time for I Hear You, the part of our show where Jack Worthing, that's me, answers your letters and questions about our life in Wellington Wells. Let's see what Rosalie Millay Scott has to say. Wait a second. Do I detect a hint of roses? Oh, Rosalie, If this is a love letter, it's going to be very embarrassing when I read it out in the air. Dear Uncle Jack. Well, that's better, isn't it? Whose uncle are you? Are you my uncle? I don't remember having an uncle. Dear Rosalie. Oh, how I wish I were your uncle, because you seem like a lovely girl. But I'm not biologically anybody's uncle. I just feel like I'm an uncle, and many of your fellow viewers feel like I'm their uncle too. So it just sort of grew like dandelions. And you know how difficult it is to uproot dandelions? They just keep growing back, which is lovely because you can eat them. Did you know that? But I digress. The way uncles do, eh? All you need to know, my dear, is that I feel as fond of you as any uncle ever could. And I hope you feel just as fond of me. All right, Rosalie? Good. This one is from... I think it's from... yes, it's from Dermot Nightingale of Gascoigne House, Upper Borough Walls. Dear Uncle Jack, a few days ago, I saw a bunch of citizens chasing someone down Milk Street. They ran right past me, so naturally I was swept up in the flow, and soon I was chasing the man down the street as well, and I'm pretty sure we caught up with him. But I can't remember what happened next. I think we beat him, but I can't remember if we killed him or not. Do you know who he was, and did we kill him? Do you know why we were chasing him? Well, dear Dermot, I don't think you should worry about this sort of thing. If a whole bunch of citizens were chasing someone down the street, I think we can safely say that that someone did something wrong. After all, there's only one of him. There's lots of you, so you win the vote. Anyway, what's past is past. And we've all done things that weren't perfect. Listen, if we spent all our time worrying about the things that we've done, well, we'd never be able to enjoy our day. So feel better. Pop a few extra joy today, and I bet in the morning you won't even remember what you were so upset about. I'm so glad I was able to help. Well, I did so enjoy hearing from all of you, my dear listeners. Yes, I love these letters. This one is from Mr. Fitzloyd Dix of Monmouth Place. Dear Uncle Jack, I haven't been feeling entirely well these past few days. I feel rather tired, and it's hard to get out of bed. So I asked my husband to get this letter for you. Oh dear, I hope this isn't going to be a medical question. I've already called the doctors once today. No, it isn't. I've noticed an odd thing. On the roof across from my bedroom, I've noticed an awful lot of chickens. They just fly up there and watch me through my open window. The peculiar thing is, they're all black with sharp black beaks, and all they do all day is go caw, caw, caw. Why are there chickens on my neighbour's roof? I've never noticed them there before. Dear Mrs. Dix, I think it's likely that those are not chickens at all, but rather I think they might be crows. Crows are blackbirds that sit on rooftops and caw. Now, they may have noticed that you're not stirring from your bed, and they're there trying to keep you company while you recover. Isn't that sweet of them, eh? But I'm a little bit worried about that open window of yours. You don't want to catch a cold, eh, from the draught? Perhaps you can ask your husband to shut it the next time you see him. And this one is from Cedric Tullett of Oldfield Park. Dear Uncle Jack, this morning I was cleaning up my house, and I came across a box of military medals. I'm pretty sure they're my military medals because my father was never in the war because he had a bit of a limp. So they must be mine. I'd like to know what they're for. All I remember during the war was retreating and then the surrender. And then we all took off our uniforms, and that's all I can remember. So how could I have even won one medal? Yes, well, thank you for the very poignant questions, Mr. Tullett. And I, for one, salute you during your service during the war, sir. And I think I can assure you that the next war will be a string of English victories like you've never even imagined. After all, as we all know, the English always win in the end. Good. And I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time. I do hope that you found these letters not only interesting, but useful to you in your own life. Do keep those letters coming. In fact, with Victory Day coming up, please let me know how you're planning to spend the holiday, and the reader with the most amazing plans shall win a prize. Tune in again tomorrow for more cheery answers to your questions about your life in Wellington Wells. This is Jack Worthing saying cheerio, and on with your day.